WWT presents Experts.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of WWT Experts. I'm your host, Matthew Coble, and today we have with us two experts from Worldwide Technology talking about healthcare and cybersecurity. It's part of a four-part series we're doing on healthcare and related technologies, so you can also check out AI, cloud, digital transformation in the series. But today, it's all about security. And we have today Dr. Sanaz and Robert Geis. Dr. Cordes started her career as a physician and is now a chief healthcare advisor at Worldwide Technology. And her role with us, she consults with healthcare and life sciences organizations, big ones all the way through down to tech startups, on all the technologies that are driving the healthcare world. Robert Geis is a field chief information security officer with Worldwide Technology, and as such, he collaborates with our clients, including many in the healthcare industry, in a consultative CISO capacity to help them reduce risk, build resiliency, and optimize their technology infrastructures and business processes. So delighted to have these two experts with us here today. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, good to see you. Let's jump in. So, Worldwide Technology works with hundreds of clients across many industries out there. What is the current security landscape in healthcare, Dr. Cordes?
Yeah, so the security landscape is unfortunately not getting much better.
Yeah.
If we look at the data in 2022, I think we had like 650 breaches that affected 50 million patients, but last year, that number went up 13% in the number of breaches, but it affects 150 million patients. So, that's a large number. And so unfortunately, I think it's a hard time to be a CISO right now, a CIO. I know it's keeping them up at night. And so, I think moving forward in 2024, there's a lot of things that we were doing well in this space, but there's a lot of things that, need some bolstering and improvement.
Yeah. Is that keeping you up at night?
Yeah. It's funny, when you take a look at some of those numbers, it's a bit like talking about the national debt, right? Where they become so large that you can kind of get lost on what they actually mean. So when you think about it right now, there's an example that's happening today. So Change Healthcare, if you go out to their website, they had a portal, and you can go out and take a look and see what's been happening there. So 12 days ago, they had a cybersecurity incident. 12 days later, the update is the same. Still working on it, still working on it, still working on it. The reason I mention that one is because I think it brings it closer to home. You take a look at something that's actually affecting us right now today. It's just an example of some of these numbers. And you think about the numbers, Change is a very big entity. They've been down now for 12 days. So did they have budget? They had budget, right? So they have these different things out there. It just shows right now the scale of attacks that are out there. One of the perpetrators that's apparently been reported in public is a nation-state hacker. What does that mean? Nation state means somebody's out there after money hidden in a foreign place. Yep. So right now, 12 days later, over 5,000 businesses are not unable to collect their revenues, billing, et cetera, besides all the clinical workflows. So to say it's a big deal is an understatement. And unfortunately right now, the path is only going to get worse. Tomorrow's threats will be worse than today's.
Yeah, I know we talk about it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and being prepared for that moment, whether you're in healthcare or really industry, any industry vertical, right? So
absolutely.
Well, as healthcare organizations look to adopt and drive artificial intelligence and cloud initiatives, in the name of innovation, kind of protecting the data is going to be really important. In fact, one of the top priorities for healthcare CISOs, as defined by our own WWT research group, is managing and securing the increased burden of data. How should healthcare leaders be thinking about data security in this, with the context that there's just so much data out there? And often, it's data that's really moving across lots of different technology environments too. Like, how do we deal with that?
Yeah, truly, data is the lifeblood. You think about it, everything from clinical workflows to the business workflows, so many aspects of healthcare that rely on it. And unfortunately, what you're seeing is the stakes around data governance have only gone up. You have this concept of data in motion with this shift to the cloud. You have the concept of data governance with tighter things around AI and how it's leveraging the data. So absolutely, right now, it's one of the biggest issues facing CISOs, but here's the important part that we have to really focus on. We talk about CISOs, but data governance is not fixed by CISOs. This is an organizational-wide issue, which is one of the reasons why I'll say one of the platform slogans that we have is secure altogether because the state of security today needs to be transformed. Security cannot do it on its own. It's going to take all of us working together. Data governance is a great example of that.
Yeah. Any comments on that from your point of view?
No, I mean, I think you pretty much nailed it. And as we embark on some of these AI initiatives specifically, data is now so important, right? Because we have to use so much of it to train these models that, I think I mentioned this before when we were talking, that getting that in place now is, the downstream consequences are huge.
Yeah, well, and let's drill into that too, because another thing that our WWT research report shows, you can find that out on WWT.com, is that balancing AI initiatives with security is essential, and it's only going to become more important as AI continues to grow and evolve. So, what are you seeing as the ramifications of AI from a security perspective in healthcare, and how do leaders find the right balance with those three things?
Yeah, I think we're about, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we're about to embark on a whole new era of cybersecurity conversations as we introduce AI. I mean, even before AI, Gen AI was so democratized, I think healthcare employees unintentionally were the cause of 60% of cyber risks. Now we've got, very potentially dangerous tools that are out there that are easy to use, right? ChatGPT and things like that, deep fake, someone calling and saying, hey, I'm the CIO, Jennifer, you need to download all this PHI. I mean, these things are just all new terrain. And I think that now we start to talk about cybersecurity with the concept of, securing for, securing with, and, securing against AI, which I don't know if we were necessarily speaking that language, a year or two ago.
Yeah, I kind of like to probably make too many movie references and cliches, but I think AI is one of the Spider-Man effect. Like with great power comes great responsibility. You mentioned already, it's like the two sides of the coin. There's the security of AI. So that's a huge issue. We mentioned data governance already. Security of AI is going to be so critical for us because it's such a powerful tool. There's going to be such a temptation to go leverage this, to go get quick uplift to some of these workflows. We already have clinical staff that's overburdened, overworked. So if there's rapid uplift from it, there's a huge temptation for businesses to go after it. However, the balance of that with the threats, that's a huge issue that businesses are trying to take on. And in the cybersecurity space, because of what we have with the threats from AI, we have that other head of the coin. We have to have the security by AI. The only way you're going to be able to fight off some of these attacks like deepfakes is actually leveraging AI to identify the deepfakes. You can't rely on people now to come in and fight a war that's coming at you with computers. It's another movie reference to Terminator, right?
Right.
But we're truly at that time where it's at the precipice of a magnifier of so many different things when you mix AI in.
Yeah.
And we have to figure out a better way to go about it.
Well, I'm curious, I'm building on that, like you're a CISO, you play that role. Are you more optimistic about, generative AI from a security professional's perspective or from an adversary's perspective?
Well, okay, I guess I have to say what's obvious is the adversary piece of it is so easy.
Yeah.
I'll give an example. There's a device out there that's made hacking much easier called a Flipper Zero that you can buy for less than $200. Well, imagine what's going to be out there with AI and all these hacker rootkits. They're going to be freely available. I have teenagers that are on YouTube all the time. Am I excited about them being able to go out and possibly hack our home internet? No, I'm not happy about this.
Right. Yeah. So it's really kind of depends on the vantage point that you look at it with. Well, let's shift and talk about things from more of a regulatory perspective, right? I imagine that kind of the regulatory environment of healthcare creates its own challenges around data, AI, plenty of other topics too. Like, what's the kind of security positioning for that in the market today?
You want to hit on general security, and maybe I'll come on top of that.
Yeah, when I think about regulatory aspects of security as a whole, again, healthcare, because of the regulatory aspect, it's magnified already. But just as a whole, you've got kind of from both sides of it. From the SEC side of the house, you've got new regulatory requirements around reporting. And all these are founded with, I'll say, good intentions at heart. It's better visibility, trying to get these things out there. However, that poses a serious challenge out there for people to have this balancing act on, do I invest in actually executing on the doing of the security, or do I spend more time on the reporting of doing security well? So CISOs are forced to try to have this balancing act with these new regulatory changes out there. In fact, we see this so much that we've actually launched a managed service around this that we call MARS, and it's Managed Advisory Risk Service. And the whole concept is, how do we help come alongside and help sort through some of these aspects of it? Because the biggest challenge that we have, you can go out and do a lot of really, really good things, but if you're not aligning your business priorities and your business risks together, you really could be investing a lot of time and effort on things that don't matter. Obviously, regulatory aspect, compliance things are going to force you to go do some of those things. You should be figuring out how to work those into your program, though, so you're doing them the right things at the right time with the right resourcing. And I think this is one of the things you're seeing a huge push from the SEC. And as a former CISO, I have a lot of empathy for CISOs, considering what's happening with, you look at the SolarWinds CISO, the Uber CISO, the stakes have never been higher. It's not just a matter of losing your job. You could actually be facing jail time now from some of the regulations that are out there. So we're definitely seeing a huge push for people to come in and look for somebody to come alongside them to help them make these hard choices.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think specific to healthcare, we're seeing more and more, regulations. States are, like my own state of California, Consumer Protection Acts, many of those are popping up in other states like New York, all aim to help with this PHI risk for sure. And I think, at a national level, HHS just put out that statement for, voluntary reporting. I don't know if you want to talk about that.
It's going to sound funny. Usually when those things come out, CISOs shake their heads like, great, one more thing to go do. This was actually written, though, to be more of like a best practice guide. So it's very simplistic, like 13 pages, very easy to digest. And the reason why I think this is so critical for healthcare CISOs and leaders, I mentioned already that security is not just the CISO's job. It's going to be about secure altogether. And the only way that you're going to get everybody on board is getting buy-in. The nice part about what they released is it takes a lot of the wish list that the CISO wanted to go do anyway, and it puts it in simple to understand business terms, number one. And number two, it's not coming from the CISO's desk. It's coming from HHS. It aligns well with what they want to go and execute on anyway. So it kind of helps develop that buy-in you're going to need, because trust me, security cannot fight off today's threats just by doing security a little bit better. It's got to be transformational in nature, and the only way to get that kind of cultural buy-in about transformation is getting it buy-in across all stakeholders, not just security.
Well, I know that that topic is sort of changing quickly, regulatory environment. But the other thing that continues to evolve very quickly in the space is the proliferation of connected devices, right, in the medical field. So how's the industry working to assure that all of these IoT devices are secure?
Yeah, it's interesting. Specifically in both the healthcare and the life science side of things, OT it's a totally different breed, because it's one of those areas that when people were purchasing and putting these things and installing them, securing them wasn't even a thought. Some of these things have been in place for a decade or more, depending on what part of it you're in. So you kind of have these extremes of, from a manufacturing side and governing of it, you may have environments that are a decade old, and then you also have this proliferation now of newer connected devices with use cases that were never thought of before. So the struggle that you're seeing with a lot of healthcare suppliers is, or providers, how do I eat the elephant? And I think this is an area, again, where we've seen a huge amount of traffic within our ATC environment. We have a dedicated OT lab, and we have a dedicated OT practice. And really what we want to do is come in and help meet people where they're at and think about their transformation journey, how to go implement some of these things that are just fundamentals. The same thing on the enterprise IT environment. The challenge is identity and IoT is device specific. So you've got to tackle this a whole different approach. We're seeing a huge push here with some good innovation though. OT has been an area that's been a huge attack vector. It's unique because unlike ransomware where they may want data, they want to just be able to come down and shut you down and hold you hostage. So kind of has a different threat vector, different attack vectors. So some of the things you have to go do to counterattack that are also a little bit different, whether from a segmentation perspective, really good hygiene around identity and posture management, patching whenever possible. So you kind of see a collection that's very bespoke because you've got all these different implementations out in the field. Mm-hmm. And that's where we're seeing this huge push for getting people to come in and see what can we actually go do here? And again, what's my number one priority?
Yeah. Well, Sanaz, from more of that kind of physician, clinician point of view, do those people recognize the security risks of all these IoT devices, or is that an evolution mentality that needs to happen too?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I think Robert, you're speaking about these things in a general term, and stakes are high. I mean, what stake could be higher than lives, right? And unfortunately, we've all seen the terrible, stories of ventilators being shut down and, folks getting hurt or even dying. So from that perspective, I think everyone's on board. We all get that. But to your point, again, we got to move the needle past that, right? The end users understanding, but to get to the secure level, these things have to happen. And the smart hospital market is only growing. I mean, we're going to see, some experts predict like $250 billion market by 2030. So, and that's not just FDA regulated, medical IoT devices. That's kiosks and, robots and things that you would think are, there couldn't possibly be a risk with that. But, think about hacking into an HVAC system or hacking into a, temperature control in a burn unit where patients have to be kept at a specific temperature. So that market's growing is my point. And so, following some of what Robert's saying about putting in some real controls and making that part of your central IT and, security strategy, I think is huge.
Yeah, and I'm going to add another question there too, Robert, for you. I'm thinking about all the personal devices we have too that are going to be generating, like my Apple Watch and other things like that are generating data. Do you see that as another attack surface, getting back to some of these, healthcare system infrastructures, or no?
I think as you're seeing the interconnectedness of interconnected devices, this is where you're having even a bigger challenge. You think about some new protocols that are out there where you have watches talking to phones, talking to everything else, and those have already been a widely known attack vector. The challenge is when you think about typical penetration testing, when you bring in a third party to come take a look and figure out where do you have any potential gaps, it's hard to have every single scenario mapped out because you just don't know where it's going. And we're only seeing more investment in wearables. You think about the Aura rings and things like that. At some point in time here, the amount of data that's out there and the data exchange, every time you introduce a new path, you have to be thinking about how are you going to govern that path.
Yeah, and some of those paths aren't even necessarily in the CISO's control, right? Because it's out in consumer land, which is, I'm sure, a big challenge.
As a former CISO, there was so much that's not in the CISO's control.
Right.
That's why it's everybody's problem.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, if we factor AI into the equation too, up until now, all that data, the wearable data, health systems aren't really set up to consume it. And quite frankly, doctors don't want that data dumped in. I mean, they've got so much data that they're sifting through, but with AI, there's all this talk of like, how can we use Gen AI and other forms of AI to now cull through all that information, absorb it in a way that makes sense, put it in the right place in the EHR. So there is a chance, that we're gonna move the needle on getting some of that data into the actual health record. And then to your point, then all bets are off, right? So it's really important to get this under.
Well, you can see how it builds on itself.
Yeah.
Because we just talked about data governance and how AI is a magnifier for that. Well, now you're saying the best way to have this data culled through is AI with access to all of it. And that breaks one of the fundamental pillars of what? Data segmentation, isolation, know where everything's at. So it really becomes a big challenge to govern.
Yeah. Well, so if we look ahead at the future, what's healthcare security going to look like in the coming years, and what should healthcare leaders out there tuning in kind of do to be ready for that future environment?
I guess I'll kick off this by talking. Healthcare is definitely a huge magnifier because lives are at stake. However, in the simplest terms, and I've probably been sharing this already too much, but this concept of secure altogether, that security is not just the CISO's job. It doesn't matter if it's tomorrow or 3 years from now, it's only going to continue to require us to do things differently as a whole, from cradle to grave, how we manage every aspect of the business to truly build security into that. A simple way that I have tried to have this conversation with people that are across different stakeholders to get buy-in is it's called the Kipling method. So it's the 5 W's and the H. So in its simplest form, if you want to have a security conversation and help people understand why you need to go do things differently, you need to be able to answer the who, what, where, when, why, and how at the application layer of every transaction within the company. That conversation will open the door to people at the application layer, your network people, your IT infrastructure people, your clinical workflow people. Everybody can kind of understand that part of the conversation. And where it turns out the security piece is, okay, imagine if you can answer all that, first of all, and the second piece of it is how do you govern it? If you can figure out how to govern this at different places, that means you also have control over it. The ability to have that is truly the fundamental basis of what people will call zero trust and resiliency-based practices and principles. I talk about that because it's going to take a cultural transformation for companies to take them from where they're at today to a true place where they can be secure. The only way they're going to get there is by having these open conversations and getting buy-in across the board.
Mm-hmm. Sanaz, closing thoughts for you about that? Like, how are you talking to healthcare leaders about security?
I think you covered it really well, so I'm just going to add one thought. And I actually learned this from a client recently. We met with a large healthcare organization, and we had IT in the room, and we had end users in the room, and they talked about the user experience. And that's not really something we typically talk about when we're talking about security, but when we as clinicians or staff in a health system are given a new tool, it's usually to solve a specific challenge that I have in my day-to-day, right? My workflow, my access to things. So it's a third-party application. IT's just kind of implementing and deploying it. If I hate the application, I'm going to blame who built it, right? The company that built it. But with cybersecurity, I think it feels really personal. As we roll out these tools and these solutions to employees, it feels like it's coming from IT. And let's face it, nobody goes, oh yay, another identity control access that I gotta deal with when I log on my computer. So it's a bad experience often, right? And so this organization we were meeting with, this client, was saying how this is a challenge, and really the only way forward is with anything, right, is just having a better partnership. So getting the end users actually involved and making them feel like they have a voice at the table, and rolling these tools out like you would roll out any other software where it's serving both sides.
Yeah. That really highlights how security in itself is not an outcome. It truly is all about the user experience and now delivering it in a secure manner, which bottom line is, if we're ever going to move anywhere as an industry in healthcare or anywhere else, we have to figure out a way to move the ball from the current state to the future state, which is securely delivered outcomes built in from the start.
Excellent. Well, we could continue talking about this stuff all day. It's been delightful hearing from both of you, and I hope you've enjoyed it as well. Thanks so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Yeah. Hey, and thank you for coming as well. Another great session on WWT Experts. One of the 4-part series that we have on healthcare and the technologies that are affecting it. So the other ones you should check out around artificial intelligence, cloud, digital transformation. Those and a lot more are out there on WWT. So head to wwt.com/events. Lots of events coming up in the future, plenty in the back catalog that you can view on demand at any time. We'd love to hear your feedback if you have any from that session today with these two. And thank you for coming. We'll see you next time.